Welcome to the Joanne Avison podcast. Join me today as I dive deep into the fascinating world of fascia. And today I'm going to challenge myself to decode its intricate sacred geometry. I'm just going to introduce you to it, or at least give you an idea and begin a journey together of going deeper into why sacred geometry is such a significant aspect of the fascia. So first of all, what is fascia? For those of you that don't know this channel or are new to fascia. Fascia is a complex network of so-called connective tissue that plays a vital, if misunderstood, role in our anatomy and movement. We call it connective tissue, but the truth is, in efforts to distinguish it, there's a great deal of difficulty to be had in the science and the research, because we begin as whole and complete. We continue our lives as whole and complete. So to say that parts of us are connected as if they've been put together as an afterthought doesn't really make sense of us, because we self-organize into form. And fascia, it turns out, is the unsung hero that surrounds, supports everything in our bodies, every cell, every organ, every muscle. But it's been overlooked in anatomy for years. It's been taken for granted as the in-between. But with made of fascia, if you took away everything except our fascia, you would have a ghost form of our whole body. It's a self-organizing process, more than a separate part, and it's whole and complete. In a way, nothing in the body is disconnected. It's just distinguished by different textures. It's also distinguished by different shapes. Have we missed it? Have we missed this fabric of our form? Well, it's kind of been hidden in the obvious. But what you've got to remember is that for the last 400 years, any human dissection was done by scraping away all this stuff around important features like muscles or bones or organs or specific vessels of the nervous system or the circulatory system. And by removing that fascia in order to see each little aspect of the body as a separate part laid out beautifully so anatomy students or medical students could see it, what was being removed was at the expense of the truth about how we move, how we live, how we breathe, how we as souls animate our soma. That somatic intelligence is not a separate interface. It is our fascial matrix, forming our skin, our inner skins, our different forms. So not only is fascia the unsung hero of the body, but its brilliance is actually unseen. And it's remained hidden in the obvious for most of the last centuries. So as we explore fascia, what we're going to uncover today is its significance. It's so essential in so many different aspects to our health and our well-being, because we are a fascial matrix expressing itself as us. We're the architect of our own architecture, self-organized to express ourselves as the architect. Think about that for a minute. You, spark of life in it as a unicellular being, self-organized your architecture to express yourself as the architect. Let's let that sink in, because it reveals a very interesting paradox. It's why even the newest knowledge of the fascia matrix actually betrays the most ancient wisdom that's incorporated in our living tissues if only we know what we're looking for. And that ancient wisdom, and I'm going to oversimplify it just to put the basic point across, that ancient wisdom is sacred geometry. Each one of us, you, me, they, every being, every living thing on this planet, in some ways, is sacred geometry expressing itself. Now, you may be familiar with Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, and I'm going to do a whole podcast on that. But that image, if you go into it deeply, is one pathway of understanding sacred geometry, which is a multi-dimensional, multifaceted study in and of itself. The most obvious way in which Leonardo da Vinci incorporated it in that image was by presenting something called divine proportion, or the golden ratio of the human body. We're not going into great detail on the golden ratio today. It's a whole story in itself. Today I want to share something with you that's actually much deeper to your tissues, and somehow it's easier to see and it's more hidden. And that's one of the many paradoxes that you will confront if you go into the study of fascia. And finding a way to unite paradox is actually a key to understanding the fascial matrix. And think about the poem by Rumi, and I'm just going to quote a couple of lines from it. Out beyond ideas of right doings and wrong doings, there is a field. I'll meet you there. It's a very, very beautiful poem. What I want you to take away from it in this particular moment, and that's just 2 lines of it, is that within us, when we find the paradoxes and we unite and go beyond them, we effectively triangulate. We create the 2 possibilities that give birth to a new idea. In ancient Aramaic, the Lord's Prayer begins, Father, Mother, God. And if each Father, Mother gives birth to a sacred being, that makes each one of us sacred. That is the foundation of sacred geometry. Now, I'm going to invite you to imagine that there's like a whisper of nature inside you that's always been there, will always be there. And since the spark of life, of you ignited into your form, your self-organizing biology, you shaped yourself, you organized yourself with all your species-specific genetics and all your structures, but you animated and activated your form into being. Your mother didn't go into hospital and have limbs bolted on or electrical currents put in or the magnetic features added. She carried you. However she did that, inside of her as a liquid crystal matrix, self-organizing yourself to express yourself as the architect. That self-organized. It's a tricky one. Now, one very common misconception about fascia is that it is passive, inert tissue. And that's what our forefathers thought when they scraped it away in order to define individual muscles, individual organs, individual vessels, individual bones and parts of us. Nothing could be further from the truth. The fascia is now known to be dynamic, to be sensory. It is an organ in and of itself. It's a proprioceptive architecture. That means it self-senses its way into form. We literally feel our way into form. And its health has a profound impact on our overall well-being. That's physical, imaginal, emotional, mental, conscious, subconscious, unconscious. And I think our spirit animates through it as I've mentioned before in previous episodes. And its secrets go deep within. And today I am just going to touch on the surface clues of the sacred geometry code that works within you right now. Now, from a scientific perspective, fascia is generally described as being made up of collagen and elastin fibers. When you read about it, you read it's a connective tissue made up of collagen and elastin, which forms a kind of a complex structure. Now, the misconception is that these two elements balance each other for flexibility and support and stability throughout the body. That is not accurate. Elastic recoil actually relies on collagen, not elastin. The human body is what's called a pre-stiffened architecture. We don't relax like if we take off a wetsuit and it just deflates on the floor. We don't do that. We stay open. We remain a volume at all times. And that relies on collagen. And it requires that in certain places in the human body, the collagen has the tensile strength of steel. That means it can resist deformation to a very high degree. And it needs that both for the spring in our step, for the ability to bounce and restore our structure, but also for the power to move and to rest without deforming. So its resistance to deformation is really important. Elastin is highly specialized and it's for wound healing. It's something the body produces when it's needed. We are far more intelligent than we realize. Think about it. If we were made of elasticy, soft, soggy stuff, given that we're somewhere around about 70% water, depending on age and fitness, the last thing we want to be is a soft, supple, soggy, elasticated bag that kind of stretches like chewing gum and doesn't spring back into shape. We want a tissue that can stand up, walk, spring, bounce over the ground, and retain its shape. The geometry of us, the geometry of our architecture, has to have certain properties to make us strong enough to climb a mountain and soft enough to curl up on a sofa and rest and recover after the climb. And when we have the privilege of seeing this incredible tissue matrix through the lens of an endoscope, what we discover is that the geometrical patterns found in fascia are truly remarkable, with lattice-like weaves and shapes that create a liquid crystalline world beneath the skin of polyhedral chaos. Now hold that thought, and I'm going to tell you exactly what that means. A polyhedron is a multi-sided, multifaceted shape. Now, in his videos through an endoscope under the skin of living patients, surgeon Dr. Jean-Claude Gamberto calls it fibrillar chaos. And it is very beautiful to see. Now, these geometric patterns have a profound impact on how our body functions and moves. And they incorporate a geometric code. The sacred geometry found within fascia holds a profound secret. It's not just a physical structure, but it's a key to unlocking our full potential, our energy potential, and revealing the sacred nature of every known crystal in the universe. Stay with me, because by understanding the intricate patterns and the shapes that make up fascia, we really can gain a deeper appreciation for the interconnectedness of our body and the resonance field we form with all living things. We're not separate from the patterns of everything in nature, of everything with everything else. It's almost like a consciousness grid within us, if we know what we're looking at. Now, I've spoken before about the fact that everything in the human body is round or rounded. There's no front, back, or side delineation that makes sense of us in linear mechanical terms. We're just not biomechanical forms, however commonly misused that term has become. And as a liquid matrix, a liquid crystal matrix, we embody rounded cells organized in rounded organs within us. We're a rounded organism. And that form can take on as many different shapes and configurations as there are beings on the planet to shape ourselves as. There literally are not two people anywhere at any time, in any place, at the same place and time, the same shape. It baffles me why we get upset with one shape, one size, one colour, one style is better than another, or is more acceptable than another, or is cosmetically more pleasing than another. No, every single one of us offers and expresses a unique shape. We self-organize uniquely. And round things in soft matter abide by the laws of soft matter physics, which is encoded in and encoded by geometry. Every single living thing represents some form or another of nature's codex, and that codex is geometry. Think about the word. Geometry means earth measure. Geo means earth, metry comes from meter. And meter derives from mater, mother. So geometry literally means the measure of Mother Earth. Mother Earth is a round planet in a solar system that has geometric relationships, proportions, and structural correlates with every other celestial body in our galaxy. Now, John Sharkey describes the fascia within us as the dark matter of the inner cosmos. And he calls it our tissue of temporality, meaning our tissue of time. For me, it is the in-between of all the round things within us, which are arguably made of it, held together in the space-time of our inner cosmos. And you will find the same geometries as you see in the relationships of the planetary motions within us. All of our ingredients, that which makes us into us, living beings, rely heavily on substances that can only be found in the cosmos from dying stars. The iron that we rely on, the iron that works in our bodies, in our blood, that gives us our animation, gives us such a key part of our health. It's got nothing to do with the iron tablets and the iron drinks that we take as supplements. It comes from one place in the whole universe. It's the dust of a dying star. We are literally made of stardust. Everything Brian Cox says is true about the human body. We're sort of held together with this gluey gel-like bound water that's bound by protein, and we are biologically formed by the same code as Mother Nature's geometry of all the spheres in the universe. The cells that make up a plant, the cells that make up an animal, the cells that make us, all living things. And here's the first step in this huge story, and it is huge, of living sacred geometry that you incorporate. In geometry, there are multiple shapes. And we're going to look at those shapes today. We're just going to consider the 5 most famous ones, which are the archetypal 5 regular polyhedrons, and they form the famous Metatron's cube. So I'll go into this more later in other episodes, but what I wanted to do today was provide you with an overview that's designed to reassure you that nothing as literal as a mechanical system of levers explains the sacred nature of your human form, let alone describing how it moves itself around over the ground in space over time. There are no levers in nonlinear biologic forms, period. We made that up when we tried to reduce the function of the human body into flat planes, linear construct, and movement theories with agonist and antagonist muscles that bend our limbs as levers. It's just wrong. It's just the wrong metaphor. We are made of far more complex, rounded shapes. Now, there's three kinds of mathematics: what's called secular mathematics, symbolic mathematics, and sacred mathematics. And the ancient wisdom of our forefathers understood the sacred mathematics of geometry and considered them as such. Perhaps that's why the ratios of our bodies are called divine proportion. Now, what are the 5 regular polyhedrons? I want you to remember very carefully what I've said here, the 5 regular polyhedrons. So you might wonder, why 5? Well, 5 is the archetypal number of life. The seed becomes the tree, which has the flower, which becomes the fruit, which has and encloses the seed. Seed, tree, flower, fruit, seed. 5 is considered to be the archetypal number of life. And living things have these 5 sacred polyhedral geometries. And they're the 5 fundamental crystalline structures that make up the regular forms in nature of every living thing on this planet, even the crystals that grow as rocks. Because they form the mostly interlocking nature of geometry within everything, vibrating at all sorts of different frequencies and densities. So remember, these are called the 5 regular polyhedrons. And the names of these 5 shapes are the tetrahedron, the hexahedron, the icosahedron, the octahedron, and the dodecahedron. Each one of these has a different number of sides and angles and corners. And I'm going to go into detail about each one in another podcast. But what I want to give you is 2 essential pieces of information here that might reassure you that you are formed of sacred geometry, based on the middle one of these 5 regular shapes, which in every living body is in constant motion. The first essential piece of information to really understand this sacred geometry within us is that only one of these 5 platonic solids, and it might be easier to think of them as 5 platonic volumes, can move without interlocking. And that one is the icosahedron. It doesn't lock together to form an interlocking patterns like the other 4 can. Essentially, at its highest frequency, it forms the nearest to a rounded shape in geometry, the nearest to a sphere. You actually probably are quite familiar with that if you think geodesic domes. You'll have an idea of how the icosahedron is structured. So imagine that the cells in your body are formed of rounded geodesic spheres. You could have a geodesic dome and a geodesic dome together, and the more detail they're in, the more rounded they are. And you get an image of how they pulsate together, held together by the membranes around them that form the organs and the organism. So think of the membrane around liver tissue or liver cells, or the membrane around muscle cells. And that membrane can be at every scale in the body. But basically, what you're thinking of are round things that can move around each other. They are close packed, but they don't interlock. They're not blocked like a more obvious structure of a crystal, like an amethyst crystal. They're all interlocked, so they have a rigidity to their form, which we don't have. We don't want to be sloppy and soggy, as we said before, but we don't want to be so rigid that we can't move. So our cells are icosahedral in nature, which means they don't interlock. A helpful image that I use is, think of a net bag full of squash balls. And even if it's absolutely full, you can still move it because the balls can move on each other. And then think of all the spaces in between them as what we would call the interstitium. So whether you're thinking of that as the organelles within a cell, or the cells within an organ, or the organs within an organism called you. And you have to think of that in terms in the body also of the gel that all of them swim in. Now, the other 4 regular polyhedrons in nature, as I said, they interlock to form very strong solid shapes, and each one has special unique properties. And each one actually symbolizes a different aspect of nature. We'll go into these later, but earth, air, fire, and ether. The icosahedron represents water. And think about it, we are 70% approximately water. So in the human body, every cell is inside a membrane within an organ. Every organ is inside a membrane called the body. Everything has to be able to move within and around everything else. So only this particular geometric platonic volume, the icosahedron, permits that. There's a lot more to it, but let's begin here, because I want us all to recognize that we depend on hydration of our cells and what they swim in, moving around each other as we move and respond to our every breath and gesture within the fluid matrix of our fascia. Now that fluid matrix is in a continuum. And here is the second essential piece of information. The in-between of the cells is not based on the icosahedron, even though it is living. It is a living liquid crystal matrix. It is fluid, and it surrounds the cells which are icosahedral in nature. The in-between does not take the shape of any of the 5 regular platonic volumes. Now think about it. Everything in the universe has its equal and opposite. The in-between of the cells, based in one of the regular polyhedrons, is the opposite of them. Opposite of any one of the 5 regular geometric volumes. There are only 5, as I said. So where do we find the opposite of 5 regular polyhedrons? Well, we've got to find the opposite of a finite number of regular shapes is an infinite number of irregular shapes. So we have a finite number of regular polyhedrons in the lexicon, but an infinite number of irregular polyhedrons in nature's lexicon. Where are the irregular polyhedrons in the human body? The answer's everywhere. They're readily seen in the videos by Jean-Claude Gamberto, who I interviewed a while back. We'll put a link here. As the world between the cells of the body and the organs. The interstitium of you is not empty space. It is filled with the fibrillar chaos of the fascia's expression as irregular polyhedrons, infinite number of them. You can see their patterns right now just by looking at your own skin. Have a look at the back of your hand and notice the tiny, tiny patterns of irregular polyhedrons. Well, they represent the fascial tissue underneath, the skin ligaments that move through the superficial fascia to the deep fascia that moves through the myofascia, which moves through into the deep, deep, deep endomysium within the muscles, but that also forms the gliding interfaces with the periosteum around the bone, which has something called Sharpie's fibers going into the bone, which is more crystalline, which then holds inside it the bone marrow. And inside that is where new blood is formed, hopefully full of the iron of stardust. It's just the most incredible thing, and so much more complicated than we realize. It's so much more multifaceted. And when you look at your own skin, that surface clearly indicates to you what's happening immediately underneath it. Look closely. You will see the geometry, Mother Earth's measure of you, animating your finite body with your infinite soul. So there's a finite number of living polyhedrons that are regular, and an infinite number of living polyhedrons that are irregular, and together they combine to form the fascial matrix. So let's put these two pieces of information together as if we've found something, the beginning, a taste of the body's geometry code. Let's consider that every cell is a round thing, representing and represented by the middle one of the 5 regular platonic volumes, and its shape is essentially based on the sacred geometry of the icosahedron, which represents water in the 5 elements. And surrounding every cell is an infinitely changing geometry of irregular polyhedrons. And that is exactly what we see in the fascia of the in-between everywhere in the human body under the skin. In fact, you can see its pattern in the skin. And it actually gets more profound as we go deeper and understand more about the patterns of icosahedrons in living bodies. That takes us into the world of art, Kenneth Snelson, of architecture, of Buckminster Fuller, and the world of cellular biology by Dr. Donald Ingber, who reveals just how important this principle is in the human body at the cellular level of health and the structural integrity of movement. It's a fascinating codex deep within the human form. And I'm going to spend a lot of future episodes going into different aspects of it. What I want to ask you now is to change, at least, if not transform, your approach to your physical health. See your body as a holistic, integrated system of spirit animating and dancing through the pattern of your matter. Consciously animated, not just a collection of separate parts that we have to kind of force into methods, but the pattern of your matter, the matter of you, your pattern, expressed by the motion that denotes you as alive and breathing, respiriting from one moment to the next. The word pattern comes from pater. The word matter comes from mater. So this is the Father, Mother, God, the Father, Mother, Divine, the sacred birth of the child of Mother, Father that comes forward into the world as a new conscious being. As we explore this concept further in future episodes, we'll discover new ways to heal and optimize our body, our mind, and our being, from soma to soul. And what we've learned here is that the pattern within us, the pattern of us, the nature of our matter is nature's sacred geometry. It's animated by the shapes and forms of the fascia. And recognizing fascia's role in our bodies and its geometric significance is crucial, not only for a healthy approach to our beingness, but to the recognition of how extraordinary we are, how brilliantly we self-organized as sacred geometry in motion from the outset. It contains our life force, sustaining itself in ways that we can barely imagine. And it's all there in the code. And if you're as fascinated by fascia and its innate geometry, its nature as a multidimensional liquid crystal matrix as I am, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. I love getting your comments. Thank you so much. And be sure to check out the other episodes about fascia as an interface, as a proprioceptive awareness. But understand that it already incorporates your divinity within the geometry, the measure of Mother Earth, of you, animated as the pattern of your own matter. God bless. Enjoy. And don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to share. And don't forget to comment. With all my love.